Welcome to the Biodiversity session of the European Research and Innovation Days. We have a very exciting session today and a very wonderful panel of very distinguished speakers and discussants. Here in the Brussels studio in Orban, I have with me John Bell, Director of Healthy Planet at the Research and Innovation DG.
Good morning.
Good morning, John. And Hilde Egermont, the co-chair of the European Biodiversity Partnership, currently under development, and representative from the Belgian Science Policy Service. Hello, Hilde.
Good morning, everyone.
And because this is a hybrid event, very exciting one, we have our panel of remote speakers. I see out of the 4 that should be connected today, we have 2 who managed to make the connection. Hello, we have Stephen Hart from the European Investment Bank. Hello, Stephen, how are you?
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. And Daisy Hessenberger from IUCN. Hi, Daisy. Hello.
Hi.
Yes, we can see you. The other 2, as you see, would be Paul Heber, EBOL Scientific Director from the International Barcoding of Life Consortium. He's connecting from Canada. It's 4:30 in the morning there. I hope he manages to connect safely. And Anne Larigauderie, the Executive Director of IPBES, who will be giving us the keynote speech if she managed to connect. But first of all, I have a very special welcome address by Ms. Elizabeth Maruma Mrema, the Executive Secretary of the Convention for Biological Diversity. Video in, please.
Distinguished speakers and panelists, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, greetings. Let me welcome you to this session of the 2nd edition of the Research and Innovation Days. Almost 30 years after the adoption of the Convention, with its provisions on biosafety and on access and benefit sharing, research and innovation based on biodiversity continues to hold potential to contribute to the well-being of humankind and to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Nature and the services it provides are the basis for solutions to the challenges humankind faces. Such nature-based solutions only arise in conjunction with human research and innovation efforts. Take an example. The current work on adapting cultivars to changing climatic conditions, or research undertaken on fungi for recycling plastics to building construction. Such research and innovations need to be promoted and scaled up for the sake of humanity's well-being and in order to provide incentives to conserve biodiversity and use it in a sustainable manner. Integrating the values of biodiversity into innovation policies is a key component of the Convention's aim to mainstream biodiversity across society and economic policies. This is part of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework currently under development. The new policy approach to biodiversity research and innovation in the European Union is welcome, and the proposed work program is another critical step towards such promotion and scaling. I therefore wish you an excellent discussion on this critical agenda. Thank you.
We are very honored to have this distinguished welcome address, and I would like to know more about you. Please tell us who are you and where are you connecting from? First question, where are you from? You have 20 seconds. Majority in Brussels, but I see all over Europe, Israel, it's abroad, well, mostly northern countries, Spain. Okay, I can see that at least member states and associate countries of Horizon Home, at home, yeah, many of you are at home, are represented. Second question, who are you? Give us in one word, what is your current role? Researchers, but it's great that we are also followed by a lot of different roles in the research and innovation community. Our programs are not only for the research community. We want to encompass all the co-creators of knowledge and the users of that knowledge. I would like to go to the third question, and the third one is a tricky one. In your opinion, what is the main challenge for biodiversity? And this was actually the contents of the keynote speech. If we can have it, we will have it later, because IPBES has been making a tremendous work in identifying the drivers of biodiversity loss, direct and indirect, and also to see what is needed to face them. So the main challenge biodiversity is facing is researcher, industrial agriculture. I can see a number of drivers. Thank you very much for your contributions. John, you see these are the challenges. Do you think that science can be the solution?
I think there can be no solutions without science and people working together. And I think we have to be optimistic. We're moving beyond looking what the problems are now. Today we're going to talk about how we turn recovery into recovery for the planet and for the people living on the planet. So it can't happen without science. If we're running out of time, we're certainly not running out of ideas, and now's the time for science to step up.
Mm-hmm. Would you elaborate more on what are the policies that we are addressing with Horizon Europe?
So I'd say very straightforwardly, here in the European Union, I think what people need to see is that we're not sitting around anymore looking at the problems. The European Union is about getting climate neutral and getting the Earth back on track. That's what the European Union is for the next 30 years. And biodiversity, as Timmermans, the Vice President, was saying yesterday, is inextricably linked with this big climate challenge, the great transition. So today we have a great opportunity to hear from you and from people who are going to lead the charge here in the transition. How do you want to use science to work with society and the planet to make this transition happen? So there's a few very basic aspects here, Josefina. One is at the level of the EU, we're going to use everything that we've got to make this transition happen. We're going to actually use this great transition and all the policies that we have as part of what's called the European Green Deal to change the policies. You've already seen there's an ambitious new biodiversity strategy for 2030. Agriculture, farm to fork, pollution, waste, circular economy, everything has got to change. And we're going to use policy and law, but we need the ideas, the science, and we need people to make the whole thing happen. Secondly, research and innovation, as Josefina is saying. Horizon Europe, which is the next big public framework program, is focusing on this, is setting direction, is convening people. And now we have to move from science simply as observation to science as setting direction, de-risking, mobilizing the finance, giving citizens and scientists the opportunity to do things, and creating the demonstration sites that are there.
How would you position Europe in the global scenario?
Well, I think the European Union has said, whatever is happening around us, we're an open Europe. We are intending to be a continent that's willing to lead, willing to share the burden, and willing to work with our neighbours in whatever way it is, north and south, east and west, to make things happen. We know knowledge is the oil in the next economy. And if we're going to solve this thing, we'll do it by working together. The EU will be open. I think the work being done by our colleagues in the CBD and in IPBES is fantastic. We need to step up our relations. We need to invest more in the relations, and we need to share more of the knowledge that is there for the solutions.
Thank you very much, John. We are showing now these slides that is summarizing biodiversity and ecosystem services research proposed for Horizon Europe. As you see, there are several areas that we are going to cover or we intend to cover. Many of them are not traditionally scientific. They are actually in this interface that John was mentioning with people and society. But the most traditional one, the purely scientific one, is data and knowledge. We were supposed to have with us Paul Hebert from the International Barcoding of Life Consortium from Canada, but in the meantime, because his connection seems to not to work, we can show his video of the Bioscan initiative, which is gathering this kind of data to understand biodiversity decline. Video in, please.
Our living planet, a library of life. Every species like a book, holding the information for humanity's greatest innovations, new medicines, technologies, and economic development. But we are burning those books before we've even read them. We want to know all life, every species. We are the International Barcode of Life Consortium, and we are illuminating biodiversity through DNA-based analysis. By using automation and rapidly evolving DNA sequencing technology, we are bringing this vision to life. Our new scientific program, BioScan, is shedding light on unknown species, tracking their distribution, abundance, and interactions. BioScan will bring us closer to building a complete library of life, forming the basis for an Earth observation system. Together, we must act. We are not just scientists. We are rangers in national parks collecting the data required to monitor ecosystems. We are indigenous peoples protecting our lands and traditions for future generations. We are citizens supporting science and conservation in our country. This is BioScan, collecting, mapping, and revealing life's diversity, our species acting to protect all species before we lose the possibility of even knowing them.
And there he is. Hello, Paul. Paul Hebert, the scientific director of the International Barcode of Life Consortium. And hi, Paul. We showed your video before you. What time is now in Canada? Hello?
It's getting late. It's 25 to 5 in the morning.
Oh my God. Thank you very much for being available for us. And we were watching the images of the barcoding initiative. And my question for you is, which kind of data do we need to address biodiversity loss? And how is this data going to be gathered? And how much data do we need?
Yes. Well, of course, we are a science with a tremendous history, 250 years of study. And we've done a fair job of documenting major life forms on our planet, but 90% multicellular life still lack the scientific registration. And for a lot of biodiversity science history, that's the goal, register life on the planet. But, when you think about that's sort of like listing the elements and not knowing very much about their attributes. And so with the BioScan project, we're aiming to go beyond the documentation of species and understand their interactions and their dynamics. So really beginning to get a look at the way the life on our planet access the system. And this really was impossible until quite recently. It's because of the advances. One is the tremendous advances in DNA. The second, of course, is the advance in computer technology, which opens up digital imaging and also processing large data streams. And bring these things together and impossible becomes possible. So this is a golden age for biodiversity. Time we've been able to consider laying plans for a global biodiversity system. And I think we look back to the 19th century when weather networks were established to investigate or support every activity. And of course, they laid the foundation for us under the global.
I need Paul. I think your audio connection is bad. Would you please maybe turn your camera off so we can hear you better? I think it's cutting.
Yeah, let me try that.
Oh, now it's perfect.
Is it best echo too, unfortunately? Is this going to help at all?
Much better, thank you. Please continue.
Oh, so we just got a bad connection.
Yes, I guess so. Could you, yes, now we can hear you perfectly. Would you continue, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, the Bioscan mission, it's a 7-year project, and where we're heading on this is to really lay the foundation for this global biosurveillance system. So we anticipate that within 20 years, we can complete this inventory of life, this business that's been ongoing for 250 years, and not just complete the inventory, but put us in a place to track all of the species that are on our planet in a dynamic fashion.
Thank you very much. How do you see Europe in this global endeavor? Because this is an international consortium. Is Europe participating somehow? Or you plan?
Yeah, well, there are 32 nations around the world that are participating, and Bioscan had its genesis from an earlier project. So this International Barcode of Life Consortium has been active for a decade, and Europe has been one of the really important participants in that project. But I will say that it's been a national initiative. So it'll be Norway, Finland, or Germany, and there hasn't been the opportunity to develop a European coalition, which is something that would be very, very helpful indeed.
Thank you very much. I think John would like to comment on that.
Yeah, Paul, this is fantastic. I think we need to get this thing done. In what I didn't get a chance to mention earlier, we're launching these big 4 Green Deal missions this week, which are kind of, you could call them moonshots or earth shots, attempts to make transformational change driven by research innovation happen. And it's very striking in the one on the oceans, the mapping of the DNA of the sea is one of the components. So I think we have a lot of work to do together in delivering this library of life for the future.
Is there any question in the chat concerning this area of data and the drivers of biodiversity loss? Otherwise, we could go to the next Slido. The next Slido question for the audience. If it works. Any comment from you, remote?
No, I think from a practical consideration in terms of developing projects, I mean, I think what we need is a lot more contextual information. In a way, the strategies we're trying to develop for climate or biodiversity, say in forestry, agriculture, we can't really assess their relevance or the potential without having a place-based sense. So, alongside with the data collection, maybe say in terms of a species level, I mean, we definitely need to see the context at landscape level.
Mm-hmm. But that is integrating this data from the molecule to the ecosystem. Hilde, would you comment on this integration?
No, indeed, I think it's not only like the knowledge based on status, trends and dynamics that will be important, but I think we also need knowledge on how efficient our policies have been in tackling the crisis, and knowledge to help guiding policy development and maybe improving the implementation. Also using the data to set forward scenarios for the future and pathways to make it happen. So I think we really need to, it's not only about collecting data, but it's also about what we will do with the data and to put it at a higher level.
Exactly. This is actually what we want to do in Horizon Europe in this understanding biodiversity decline sub-destination. And that, well, this is a discussion actually, that brings me to going from the molecule to the ecosystems to the next sub-area that is actually the value of nature. Can we value nature? What is needed? What is the value of natural capital? Stephen Hart is a senior loans officer at the European Investment Bank in the Natural Capital Financing Facility. And my question to you is, in practical terms, what is the value of restoring biodiversity?
Well, I think this, to all practical intents and purposes, this is a child with many names. If you just call it nature, right, for a moment. effectively, what we're trying to do is establish a balance. If we say we want to restore nature, really, it's about a balance between us and our surroundings. And this has profound implications because nature has to exist with us, and therefore we have to trust it. And I think this is one of the biggest hurdles we face at all levels, is that we actually have to trust nature to do its job. So that's one thing that the value will be, is simply redefining our relationship. And this has a number of practical implications. Eventually, this will be how we regulate things. You know, when we regulate for environment or other, say, performance in services or whatever, how do we incorporate some degree of trust in natural processes? I think this is a huge value in itself, just redefining how we operate. Ultimately, you know, the value will be how we design and integrate nature into engineering, for example, into long-term strategies. And this is really where we need a lot more data collection to give people comfort, to be inclusive of nature, you might say, in achieving these objectives. Nature-based solutions is obviously a topic that is finding its way into a lot of areas. And it all revolves around, you know, wanting to deploy nature in some set of objectives. And the evidence base, again, for doing that, and the regulatory tolerance of doing that, the probabilistic engineering that requires, these are areas that need to be developed. Now, you asked about the value of nature. I mean, the obvious answer to that question is our survival. But if I want to turn around, I mean, what is it that we have to generate, at least, that's new? And what will we get out of it? I think it will be these things that will simply redefine the way we include nature in our decision making, and that the ability to reach that level of trust in nature to do that.
Trust in nature. Do you think that integrating accounting, natural capital accounting, into the economies of every country can increase this trust?
I think where we are today, we're coming from an era where we've had regulation in a number of sectors. You know, we've gone from, say, end of pipe style regulation. We've got environmental regulation in a number of spheres. We have ESG, we have circular economy, we have bioeconomy. All these concepts are out there. But we don't have a strong integrative framework for this. And for that reason alone, you might say natural capital accounting is simply a way of putting all this in context and creating the synergies that we need. But obviously there are, you know, there are limitations to the concept too, and we need to be aware of them. I mean, ultimately, many of these decisions that we need to take, in a way, doing the simple things right, don't necessarily require, say, a lot more data. You don't need a lot of data to establish that say, trawling the North Sea is probably not a great idea, or removing mangroves is not a great idea, right? Having subsidies to drain peatland is probably not a good idea. But we are in a situation where we're trying to get attention at the highest level of government. So we're trying to link up, so the capital markets, the Ministry of Finance, with engineers, the scientists. And in that sphere, natural capital accounting is useful because at least it gives us some metric. You know, there's nothing pretentious in wanting to measure nature, right? I mean, we want to understand it better. Mm-hmm. Whatever those metrics are, as long as it makes us wiser and allows us to guide the decision-making that we need. I mean, it's a useful concept. It's obviously a gargantuan task to do this properly. We just need to be conscious of some of the limitations. I mean, nature is a complex, non-linear thing. I mean, when we're talking about nature, we're talking as much the connections as the substance. So again, we just need to be aware of what we're dealing with. But yes, we need some kind of integration of our work. And for that, natural capital accounting, I think, can be quite useful.
Integration is the word. And we have finally our keynote speaker with us. Hello, Anne. I'm happy that you finally made it. Anne Larigauderie is the Executive Secretary of IPBES. And I'm ready for you if you want to tell us what is the challenge.
Yes, I'm happy to do so. I have missed the beginning, so I'm imagining that you would still like me to show my slides. So I would like to warmly greet all of the people who are there in Brussels on the panel and the other panelists, as well as our audience around the world. And many thanks to you, to the European Commission, DG Research and Innovation, for really this important opportunity to discuss policy and action for biodiversity. I believe that the global conversation is really changing on biodiversity, that there really is a huge increase in the level of awareness around the world on biodiversity. So now is really the time to have this conversation about the scientific priorities. And one of the reasons why this awareness has increased around the world is really because thanks to science, I think, in part, and this is why today it's really important to have that conversation on science. And I'm happy to report a little bit on what IPBES has been doing, and I was very happy to also see that our work, and particularly the global assessment of biodiversity and ecosystem services, has hugely inspired the European Green Deal and the EU biodiversity strategy in particular. So what this slide shows here is that for its first 5 years of life, IPBES, which, as you know, is very strongly inspired from IPCC, has really started to build a strong knowledge base for decision-making on biodiversity. And it has done so based on the thousands of scientific publications from scientists worldwide. So 8 assessments have been produced. I will not cite them all, but it started with a pollination assessment in 2016. Then in 2018, closer to Europe, there was a report on biodiversity and ecosystem services in Europe and Central Asia. And then last year, the first work program culminated with the launch of the global assessment of biodiversity and ecosystem services. Next, please. So what I will do is share now with you 6 key conclusions of that global assessment, and then end with some considerations regarding scientific priorities in the conversation today. So the IPBES Global Assessment first found that nature has been deteriorating at a rate and scale unprecedented in human history. This 1 million of plant and animal species out of an estimated total of 8 million really became viral and the symbol of that global assessment, if you will. But there were, of course, many other data. 15,000 scientific publications were analyzed. Next, please. Second, the report concluded that this has affected the contributions that people receive from nature, and that these contributions have been deteriorating worldwide over the past 50 years. So there are 18 contributions, 14 have been deteriorating. That includes all of the regulating contributions, which you see on top here. So this is the capacity of our ecosystems to pollinate our crops, or to regulate our climate, or to provide good quality water, for example. Also, the non-material contributions have declined, all of them. And this is what gives us a sense of belonging to a place, but also all of the physical and psychological experiences that we draw from nature. So all of that has been deteriorating, and only 4 contributions, the material contributions, have increased, as you can see here. Number 12, for example, in green, which is the capacity to produce food as well as materials. Next, please. The third message which I have added here, of course, in the context that you know, the global assessment was released much before the pandemics. It, however, did talk about it. It concluded, in fact, that zoonotic diseases present significant threats to human health, and that they can be exacerbated by human activities, and that includes, in particular, land clearing, deforestation, habitat fragmentation. So IPBES held a workshop on biodiversity and pandemics in July, and we are currently working on finalizing a first draft of the report. There will be 2 weeks for external review, so everyone can comment on it, with the idea to release it later in October. Next, please. 4, the conclusion from the global assessment was that nature is essential for achieving all of our societal goals, and that under the current negative trajectories that we have, none of the SDGs will be achieved. The report concluded that the 20 Aichi biodiversity targets will be missed this year in 2020. This is what the Global Biodiversity Outlook 5 has used the global assessment to conclude that that none of the Aichi biodiversity targets will be achieved in 2020, and that a handful of them have showed partial progress. In addition to that, the report also concluded that our key sustainable development goals will be missed if nature biodiversity continue to be deteriorated. This has to do with our goal, for example, on no poverty, on zero hunger, on good health, and on climate action in particular. Next, and 5, and very importantly, the IPBES Global Assessment showed that it is absolutely critical to address the causes of biodiversity loss. The report makes a distinction between direct causes, which is ranks per order of importance, starting with land and sea use, followed by overexploitation of resources, then climate change, which is increasing in importance over time. 4th is pollution in its many forms, including pesticides, for example. And 5th is invasive alien species. And very importantly, at the basis of these direct drivers or indirect driver are the root causes of these direct drivers, and they have to do with demography, with social aspects, cultural aspects, our economy, our technologies, our institutions and governance, and they are anchored into our values and our behaviors. And in fact, this is an area, a domain where we have constantly failed to achieve our goals. And this is a domain that is in high need of more research. And I will come back to that in a second. So 6, and last, a main conclusion from the report is that we will not reach our goal if we don't move to a transformative change. And so transformative change is, in the words of the global assessment, a way it's a system-wide change in the way that nature is valued and the way that nature is used in order to reach all of these sustainable pathways that you see listed here. And in order to achieve that transformative change. The global assessment listed a number of what it calls levers, and they have to do with things like embracing a different vision of what constitutes a good life, reducing consumption, reducing waste, reducing inequalities, internalizing our telecoupling, meaning the fact that we export biodiversity loss, particularly in tropical countries, reducing harmful subsidies, that is a major one, and of course promoting education and awareness. So more than ever, science is needed. We know what we need to do to act, but we also need new ideas, new innovations, and also a better understanding of our underlying drivers. As I mentioned, science needs to accompany us on this path and to really inform these transitions to sustainability and a truly transformative change. So I would also like to flag that IPBES is also going to accompany this transformative change. It is planning to do 2 new reports, one on this nexus assessment, looking at the linkages between biodiversity, climate, water, food, health. How do you reach all of this together rather than separately and sometimes at the expense of each other? That's one. And 2 is an assessment of transformative change itself. And of course, it will be based on the scientific work of the scientific community around the world. So I'm sorry for having arrived late because of all of these technical incidents, and I thank you very much for your attention and look forward to interactions with other panel members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. Actually, enabling transformative change is also one part of our programs. We will discuss in the final discussion, but now I would like to move to the connecting, this interconnection with research and policies. And where we have with us Hilde Egermont from the European Biodiversity Partnership. And I have one question for you, but I would like also you to address some of the questions that we see that the audience are asking. My first question is how this Biodiversity Partnership can help connect biodiversity and policies. But this links to this, the most upvoted question that we have. Do we really need to know more about biodiversity to protect it? Why don't we save the funds just to act?
Thank you. So maybe first, briefly explaining what the Biodiversity Partnership is. It's basically an overarching platform that will connect ministries in charge of research and innovation policies, funding agencies, and also foundations with ministries in charge of environmental policies and environmental protection agencies. And so basically, together, they will support the implementation of the EU biodiversity strategy. It will be an aggregation of both in-cash and in-kind resources from the member states with co-financing from the European Commission. Now, we realize that in many countries, that ministries of research and ministries of environment, that they are often working indeed in silos, and that they have different timings, different priorities. So with the partnership, we hope to bring them together and to actually build from the start, building objectives that can also help to build the bridges between both. And this will include focusing on policy-driven and solution-oriented research. Indeed, we do have a lot of knowledge already, but the thing will be to actually bring it together and to help making the business case, to use the knowledge to develop and deploy nature-based solutions, to use the knowledge to guide policy implementation. Another part of the partnership will also be to build a very strong pillar of science policy interfacing activities. So again, to bring the science to the policy level. And we will do that also by linking our members to major science policy interfacing activities and platforms such as the IPBES. Another thing that we will do with the partnership is to set up a consistent network of harmonized monitoring schemes linked to research and innovation, but also linked to policy. So again, it will be a way to connect different actors in the field And this should help support policymakers, but also citizens and also businesses in taking adequate actions, but also tracking our progress towards the targets. Now, in addition to all these common priorities, we will also try to put in place a governance for this biodiversity partnership that will give the different type of actors an equal say. And that will also allow mobilization of different types of stakeholders, because we do recognize that one of the big problems why we did not meet the targets is that biodiversity has not been mainstreamed across sectors and policies. So we will try to take that into account by co-designing the partnership and its objectives together with different stakeholders. And then last but not least, we also hope that the partnership will provide an opportunity to exchange best practices between member states. We do know that in some member states you already have these, what we call these mirror groups, where different types of ministries meet with each other. And so we do hope that with the partnership we can also serve as an inspiration for others. And then maybe, yeah, to a last thing, indeed, when it comes to do we already have enough science? Shouldn't we put the resources in the action? I understand where this question comes from. However, I do feel, and I think that's shared with many actors, that we need to make the business case. We need to use the science for the solutions. So I think it's more the interfacing where we have to put the resources in and to bring everything together.
And you bring me right to nature-based solutions. Hello, Daisy. Thank you for your patience. We have 3 minutes to go. In 2 minutes, could you tell us, now we have a standard for nature-based solutions. How do you see nature-based solutions? Is it going to change our economy? And how? And how do you see it in Europe?
That's a big question. And I just want to give, first of all, an example of a nature-based solution that's close to my heart in Europe. I'm speaking to you today from Switzerland, close to the gorgeous Lac Léman, which is vast. And we're surrounded by mountains that we often have to drive through to get to work. And we know that uphill of those mountains, Switzerland actively, sustainably manages its forests. They're called protection forests, to protect people like me and you, and also to protect infrastructure like roads from things like rock slides, from things such as landslides and erosion. And so it's, that's been going on since the mid-19th century. And we can say, Europe's been using nature-based solutions long before the term was coined 10 years ago. And, so that I feel the urgency that was brought up in that question. And why are we looking at the building blocks? Why are we, still finding out how much biodiversity we have? Why are we still trying to mainstream nature-based solutions? We have these strong examples. We know the potential. We know nature-based solutions can offer 37% of our climate mitigation needs. But we also know our challenges, and we've heard some of them today, misidentified projects, weakening or watering down the evidence base, a lack of scale on business cases, which can exclude the finance community, or a lack of meta-analyses to bring together research narratives. And so to address those barriers, IUCN launched the IUCN Global Standard for Nature-Based Solutions, and did so collaboratively through 2 rounds of open public consultation, which stakeholders from 100 countries, including across Europe, participated in, to create a tool to design, assess, learn, and scale up nature-based solutions. We can't just put them in place. We do have to understand the building blocks we're working with, what biodiversity is there, because nature-based solutions, by definition, benefit both biodiversity and human well-being, like those forests uphill of roads in Switzerland. Now, this is a great new tool. I'm excited about it, but it's only as good as its users.
Daisy, could you, we have to wrap the session. Could you give me a tweet? Just a tweet.
So on that note, I was going to explain how Europe was championing nature-based solutions along with the standard, but I will end with a tweet. The future we choose is possible when we work #together with nature. We have the will, and now with the IUCN Global Standard for NBS, we have the tool. Partner up to champion nature-based solutions, research, and innovation. Thank you.
Well, with this, we will have to end our session. This has been a very fast wrap-up. All our speakers have tweets to put on the line on the social media. Please follow the conversation.